Welcome to the first Family Lab Book Club. We have decided to start doing book clubs this year, and we're going to do it a little differently because we are busy parents with a lot to do. We're going to spend 3 months on each book, and the first book this year is The Art of Gathering. Oh, yes, you have a better copy of the cover. The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. Today we're going to discuss the intro and the first chapter. So, and it doesn't matter if you've read it or not, because we're going to cover what's in the book. It's going to be a good discussion either way. If you want to read along with us, great. If you don't, we'll kind of let you know what's in the book, and maybe you can decide if you want to read. I am here with my friend Angela Halliday, and I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit. Angela, just tell us about your family and about yourself.
Well, I'm a mom of 5, a mother-in-law of 2, a nana of 4, and a wife to my husband, Kirk. So I've been momming for a while and gathering people for quite a while.
Yes, and she is fantastic. So let's just break into this book. I love a nonfiction book that changes my mindset right at the get-go, and this is one that did. Even just in the definition of gathering, it was recommended to me actually as a book to help me with podcasting. So
really?
So you know, a podcast, we're here gathered, and that's how we're going to act for this book club. Angela and I may be in person, but you're also gathered with us as a listener. So it's so meta. We're like gathering to talk about gathering. So, but the reason that I thought of podcasts as gatherings is because of how Priya Parker defines gathering. She says the conscious bringing together of people for a reason. So it kind of expanded the way I thought about gathering. Did that?
Absolutely. It kind of, I thought at first she was just going to be talking about social events when you have a party, but it's very much bigger than that.
Yes, and that's key in her definition. So throughout our discussion of this book, we're going to focus on the family side of gathering, because the world of gathering is so huge. It can be at work, at school, at church. But we're going to focus on things that we host as a family, whether that's just ourselves as a small family, a nuclear family, or people that we invite into our home, or events that we host that are kind of family centered, just to kind of narrow it into the scope of our podcast. So this first episode will kind of focus on those small gatherings with our families. The second episode, when we get kind of more into the nitty gritty, will be talking about gathering other people in kind of small gatherings. And then the third one will be big events. So if you're reading along, the second episode will be chapters 2 and 3, and then the last episode will be a big chunk, 4 through 8. So that's how we're going to break it up if you want to follow along with us. And with that, let's go back to the intro.
Okay, back to the intro.
And I really liked, like, one of her main points, I guess her second main point besides what a gathering is that we kind of tend to think of gatherings in terms of logistics. Like we plan the logistics, and we get wrapped up in the things that surround an event. And her main purpose of this book is she says it here: my lens on gathering, and the lens I want to share with you, places people and what happens between them at the center of every coming together. So,
right before that, she leads into her point by saying, my job, she's referring to her job as a facilitator, someone trained in the skill of shaping group dynamics and collective conversations. My job is to put the right people in a room and help them to collectively think, dream, argue, heal, envision, trust, and connect for a larger specific purpose. I think it echoes back to right before when she defined gathering.
Yeah.
She talks about the reason we gather consciously is to shape the way we think, feel, and make sense of our world. It sounds very lofty.
It is, but I love it. Like
I love it too.
There's so many purposes built in that, like even heal is in there.
Heal,
envision,
argue,
trust, Yeah.
I debate. I prefer to use that word. But, whatever.
Well,
Vision,
often in
trust.
a family that turns more into
Well,
argue.
yes,
but,
it does. But
but not that should be your purpose.
Still, right. We don't do it. We don't need to plan a time to do that.
we get plenty of that.
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
Yes. Yeah, but and then she's just packing a great big
She
punch.
really
It
is.
is an introduction, so she's really
She is. She's hitting it hard. There's a lot of great quotes in
yeah.
here.
So the very next one is, I strive to help people experience a sense of belonging, and I mean, hopefully that's kind of baked into all of our family gatherings as the overarching purpose, just this sense of belonging.
That we want to be together.
Yeah.
We're a unit, a family, you would think. But then she gives a little background on herself, and you can kind of see why she never felt like she had a defined place. And so that's kind of tricky.
Right, which is kind of cool that that's what she leaned into to really like find that for herself and for other people. It's really cool.
It is.
So I guess just to end our discussion about the intro, because there's lots of good meat in the first chapter to discuss, but another quote for just that ends the chapter. First of all, I love her verbs. She says, gatherings crackle and flourish when real thought goes into them, when often invisible structure is baked into them, and when a host has the curiosity, willingness, and generosity of spirit to try. So that's a good kickoff.
That is a good
to the book.
Yeah, crackle and flourish. Those are
I
great verbs.
I really
Great
would
verbs.
love crackling gatherings.
Yeah. Do you ever have crackly gatherings? Occasionally. But I wish it was more often, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so chapter 1 is very aptly titled, Decide Why You're Really Gathering. If a gathering is a purposeful event, yes,
choice,
yes, then obviously you have to put a lot of work into the why.
The why, which happens so much further ahead than the invitation. I think we think all the details on an invitation are really important, and that's not what she's talking about here at all. We think way before that.
Yeah, again, going back to that people rather than things.
Yes, people rather than things.
Yeah, that's
logistics.
Some of the mottos that I say to my kids. Like, probably the thing that
people
comes
first,
out.
then things.
Yes.
I think I got that from Susie Orman.
Oh,
people first, then things.
Yeah. Well, excellent. So that's a good foundation for especially thinking of this chapter, because yeah, we do that so much. We go straight to the details.
We do.
And then, so she says, the first step is committing to a bold, sharp purpose.
I've never thought of gatherings as deeply as she's launching into it, especially thinking about why we gather.
Yeah.
Do we need to label? Are we mourning together? Are we learning together? Are we, what?
Yeah, and to add to that list, she starts with a big list of reasons: mourning, celebrating, making decisions, showing strength, honor and acknowledge, welcoming, saying goodbye. There's so many reasons, but I like that her very first subhead in here is a category is not a purpose. So like, I think that's another thing we fall into too much. She talks about it here, how we define our event by the category. And so I thought we could talk about what some of those categories are for family gatherings, so that we can start our own definition of what are some of the gatherings in a family, and then maybe think about some of the typical ways we think of those categories, and maybe how we could rethink some of them. So
to hone in on a stronger, more bold purpose.
Yeah. So I have my list, but I would love to start with your list. Like, what are some of the categories?
Some of my categories. Okay, the first one I thought of that seems to have been most important in my family is dinner together. Now, why do we have dinner together? Why do we gather for dinner? Our family at home looks very different now than it did 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Our oldest is 31 now. And so we've been having kids at home for dinner for, 31 years. It looks different than it used to. But I was thinking about why we gather at dinner. Well, obviously, first thing, so we can eat food that's nutritious and whatever, and have a time to reconnect at the end of the day.
Right. That would be like the category.
The category
version.
would be that.
The eating.
Purpose. The talking. Whatever, reconnecting. So why do we really want to develop a gathering that's become a tradition that hopefully is a day-to-day thing. Now, granted, disclaimer, with one child at home right now that's in high school and very busy, this looks so different than it used to. It's sometimes us sitting at the table with him when he gets home at 10 o'clock at night. And we've already eaten, and it doesn't include an eating thing. So,
But you still do.
But we still do it.
Interesting.
Hopefully.
Okay, that's
Hopefully.
awesome. Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's not at the dinner table; it's
Yeah.
elsewhere. But
Yeah.
but he needs to eat at some point, or
Yeah.
he's eating in the car some other time. But I think as I've dug deeper, thinking about what is it about having dinner together, and I know people have done research on this, like deep research, and why should we do it? And it's obviously a really great thing to do. But why do we do it? We've developed different traditions like high, lows, and buds. And that's a combination of high, lows, and what you look forward to, and the rose, thorn, and bud. Have you ever heard both of those?
Yeah.
We mixed them together.
Or pits and
whatever.
Yeah, what's the
Yeah.
whatever.
And obviously that's to get us to talk to each other about what happened during our day. But why do we want to do that? Because sometimes we don't really care, right? Do we?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, do we care who sat next to so-and-so at lunch, or, or what the hot lunch at school was that day, or, that my husband sat at his desk and didn't have lunch, or, whatever happened during the day. So why do we do it? I think a big part of it is belonging. Like she said, one of her big reasons for gathering is the sense of belonging. And then why do we want a sense of belonging? So I keep asking deeper questions, right?
Yeah.
Because we want to connect with each other. We want to be such an important part of each other's lives that the day-to-day, mundane, often, stuff adds up to becoming a connection of our souls, right?
Yeah.
We want to be such a part of each family member's life that even the mundane day-to-day stuff, it has to happen every day. We have to talk about something that we're doing every day with each other in order to build those connections that add up to shared lives rather than a shared house or a shared table.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
I mean, our lives, they can't just be crossing, like, ships in the night or something, for us to be bonded to each other in a way that's meaningful and can transform the way we live our lives, the way we connect with other people. We want the people at that dinner table to be the most important grounding people in our life. And that has to happen every single day.
Yeah, rituals.
It's a ritual
Yeah.
that has to happen every day. Granted, I'm not saying that if you don't have dinner every day, there's,
Yeah.
obviously we're all just doing the best we can, and it doesn't always work perfect. And sometimes it's not an uplifting event.
Yes. That was going to be
Maybe
my
a
next
lot
question.
of time.
Yeah.
Maybe a lot of time it's not an uplifting event because so-and-so doesn't like that, and so-and-so doesn't want to hear about that, or whatever. Not naming names, it is my children.
Well, yeah,
You know what I mean?
I was wondering, like, how that has changed since
it's
you've
changed so much.
Because I remember those years when they were little, when dinner time, the only conversation was about sitting in chairs and trying bites. In fact, we took the chairs away at some point because we realized that we were focusing too much on them sitting on chairs and that they just wanted to stand up and eat, and
Interesting.
that they stayed better
That makes sense.
if they were
Yeah.
standing. So
Yeah.
we had some standers at dinner. Sometimes we've tried many strategies to make this gathering more effective.
Yeah, I think you have to experiment too, and it changes with who's there.
Yeah.
But I know that when our children come back home with their spouses, with the little kids, the grandkids, it looks different every day.
Yeah.
But the whole idea is them saying, "Let's do high, lows, and buds, Mom, or Dad, or let's try something new. Let's try something new, and let's all try it. Everybody has to take a bite." We used to have rules that I say used to because the baby of the family gets away with a lot more than the
Right.
older ones.
Absolutely.
For sure. I wouldn't make 2 meals. Like, you eat this and you stay at the table the whole time. That's it. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Looks a little different now, for sure. But the kids still love to do it when they come home. They still want to sit around one table, all of us together, so we can see each other's eyes and connect in a way that you can't do on FaceTime or texting.
Well, and it's nice to see how that purpose can evolve, because maybe we have the same purpose all along,
Yeah.
but we just get more effective at
Maybe.
achieving that,
Maybe.
or
And I
don't know.
think people change too. We're going to connect with a 2-year-old very differently than we connect with a 31-year-old.
Right.
I mean, the type of conversation we have, the type of day-to-day interaction we have is completely different. I'm not taking care of my 31-year-old physically day-to-day,
Yeah.
But a 2-year-old grandson, he's going to need my whole focus on taking care of him physically. And so I think we talk about different things. We mean different things to each other, The grandson sees me as Nana, fun, let's go play, not you need to eat one bite of these things.
Right. And you don't have to do that.
And I don't have to do that.
Yeah.
So his mom and dad, maybe, but it changes the way, Nana to grandkids, it's a pretty great thing. I like it better than parenting.
We heard it here.
You heard it here.
Yeah.
It's the secret. Because we send them back to mom and dad who teach them different things than we do.
Yeah.
We teach them that we just love you unconditionally and we're not trying to get you to do anything other than just feel loved.
Yeah. Yeah. And there you go. That's a great fundamental purpose for the dinner table too.
It is.
Let's feel loved
Let's
together.
feel loved.
And that is where some of that regimentation and some of the rules may just
Teaching
have
and rules.
have to
Maybe.
to go by the wayside at dinner time. Maybe you make sure they get their main nutrition some other time if they
place.
struggle with the dinner time.
Yeah. And maybe, if I did it over again, I may change a few things. I may be more focused. If I were more honed in on my bold purpose,
Yeah.
then would dinner look a little different? Maybe.
Yeah, and it's not too late for any of us.
It
so,
isn't.
Yeah.
So we'll keep trying.
Yes,
Right?
yeah. So dinner is a great example. We have been at different times in our lives. We've been better and worse about dinner time together, because sometimes we've had to have dinner like right after school when
Right.
my husband's not home
Right.
yet,
Right.
or whatever, just depending on our schedule. And when we did that, we'd often still gather. If we had that early dinner, then we'd have a bedtime snack with the kids when my husband came home and ate his reheated dinner.
Yes.
So we'd gather around the table then,
Yeah.
and everybody would have a snack. And that actually ended up being really good for our family, because then the dinner time was about more of a purpose. It was being with Dad,
Yeah, I love that.
rather than like, what are you eating? And,
Sure,
So
sure.
we got that, what are you eating? Get yourself full and
They're done
healthy
with that.
early. And then it was just like, okay, have a bowl of cereal now for your bedtime snack while Dad eats his dinner. And then it was, I don't know, that worked for us in
I
that
love that.
season. So,
I love that.
So,
But it was a season too. Like it looks
Exactly.
different. Different times.
Yeah, like right now we're getting to a place where we have like a regular dinner time, and it's,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's just different. So, another time we gather is, and maybe it's been a more meaningful gathering, is for scripture study after dinner. That's when we do it. Your family may or may not do that, but that is a time we gather to specifically discuss spiritual matters and to read scripture together. But I kind of had an epiphany recently about that I'd like to share, going back to the why of that. So the categorical purpose of that is to read scripture together.
But isn't it more than that?
It is
right?
more than that.
So much more than
It's so
that.
much more than that. And so I've been, especially since reading this book, I've been reevaluating what
I love
that purpose is.
And that's why we read books.
Exactly. So
Plug for reading.
And the reading is important, because I want kids to be
Sure,
familiar with
sure,
scripture
sure.
and the language and
And the stories and the lessons.
yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
But more, I think it's a time to discuss our faith and to share our faith and to just kind of make that a cultural part of our lives too. Just to show that it's a priority. So that's another thing.
Definitely.
So this April, we both attended this church conference where one of the women, Tamara Runya, told a story about hearing somebody talk about how he loved going to his parents' house because he always felt like his dad believed in him. And so she started thinking about when her kids came to dinner, and she has grown children, and how she would kind of like make this list of things that she could remind them of or counsel them about, like maybe you could try to help out more when you come visit, or don't forget to be a good listener, be a better friend. She'd have like these words of wisdom to share with them. But she says, when I read that comment, I threw away the lists and silenced that critical voice. So when I saw my grown children for that brief time each week, I focused on the many positive things they were already doing. And then she says, when our oldest son, Ryan, passed away a few years later, I remember being grateful. Our time together was happier and more positive. So, whoa, that
was a great story.
Yeah.
It's changed the way that I think about when I interact with my kids. I wish I could say I was great at it, but I'm not yet. But maybe our job isn't to keep correcting them or pointing out things that they need to change. Maybe it really is more about, after we've already taught them, maybe it's more about just loving them.
Yeah.
And being their biggest cheerleader, encouraging what they are already doing right and good and that you agree with.
Yeah.
And helping reinforce those lessons that you study together in Scripture. I mean, we want them to choose goodness and integrity because they want to choose it.
Right.
We don't want them to choose it because they don't want to get yelled at or criticized for not doing it.
Right. And I found that that scripture study time was the time when I needed to be corrected by that quote from her, because often that was the only time we would see our teenage sons, especially at night. And so all the things we'd been saving up, like, okay, we checked your grades, or let's check your grades,
Yep.
or let's do a screen time check-in.
Yep.
All those things we were putting into that time.
And is that really what you wanted to happen from that time? No, obviously.
It was not the purpose. And we were just shoehorning all these other interactions into that. And it wasn't appropriate, first of all, when we're all gathered to talk about some of those personal things.
Exactly.
Like that should be done one-on-one.
Yes.
And it was like, okay, we finished reading our verses. Now the dogs attack, and mom and dad are both going to hound you about these things.
Then you're almost really defeating really what you wanted to accomplish during that gathering, which, like we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
Yeah. And especially like it was, even though like it was just kind of added on to that scripture time, it was making it a dreaded event.
Yeah,
like I don't want to go. I don't want to go do scripture study. Like
because that's when mom and dad get mad, or they list all the things that we should have been working on.
Or they choose specifically the scriptures that will
reinforce their perspective. Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So that changed a ton, and so we made a rule, my husband and I, that we were not allowed to talk about grades, screen time, or chores.
I love that.
During that time.
I love it.
Did
you notice a difference?
Yes. And we noticed that people didn't just split as soon as we finished reading scripture. They stuck around and hung out or played the guitar or, and it became like an intro to just hanging out at night. And it started, like that was in April, and then we finished our deck soon after that, and so then we started doing it out on the deck, and it was just like this family hangout on the deck every night, and it was like a dream. And it was right before our son left home, and so we had this really precious summer. Like, of course, I wish I would have heard that story sooner and incorporated it sooner, but it was a remarkable change.
That.
And when I read this book on top of that, I realized that I hadn't really defined that purpose for.
Why are we doing this every night?
Yeah. And I want them to have good associations with scripture and spirituality.
Absolutely.
Not negative ones.
Absolutely. And family time too.
And family time.
Yeah. Absolutely. Totally agree.
Yeah. So another couple of categories that sometimes you don't think of as gatherings is, what about driving to school?
I thought of this one too. I thought about our drives to school or other activities or even road trips.
Yeah.
the time in the car. We spend a lot of time in the car, or have over the years.
Yeah.
A lot of time together.
Yeah.
And that's a gathering.
Yeah. And the categorical purpose of that is to get from one place to another.
To get to school, to get to wherever.
Yeah.
But we are missing out if we don't think about really using that time to accomplish the purposes of why we want to gather with our family to begin with.
Yeah. And it's kind of a whining point, perhaps, of like, I'm just a chauffeur. I'm just a glorified chauffeur. And I found myself falling into that a lot. Let me tell you, after my accident, when I drove my kids to school for the first time, like, it makes me emotional just thinking about it. I cried as I was leaving the parking lot. I was like, I just drove my kids to school. Like, I get to do that still.
Yeah.
You know, I'm still alive here with them, able to do that. And it has been a year since I first drove my kids to school again, after being away from them in the hospital. And I still love giving my kids rides now. It just changed everything for me. Like, if they want to get picked up late from a friend's house, I'm like the first one to jump and volunteer. I'll pick them up from a dance. I want to be the chauffeur. I want to drive their friends around. I want to hear the chatter. I want to, like, I'm just happy to pick them up. I want to, when you're in the car with them right after an event.
Yes, that's when they're going to talk.
Yeah. Yeah. And you might miss it afterwards.
You're going to miss a lot because usually they've just been on a high from something. Our sons were in a musical in the high school together last week. And it's the driving home part after that when my son was on a high. And so our daughter was with us, my husband and I, same. Even though it's, less than 10 minutes from the high school to our house, the amount of insight that we got into his life, like a million times more than we get just at home.
Yeah, and often that can carry on to
Absolutely.
conversation
And it can
in
continue.
the house. Yeah.
It continues as we get out of the car and walk in the house, which I think we need to maybe use our cars a little more carefully as a gathering place.
Yeah.
Back when my kids were younger, when we'd drive to church, we'd always sing together to get us in the mode.
That's
It was
cute.
just a tradition. We'd sing to get us in the mode of church and to help us all calm down and focus. And other times when they'd go to school, we would memorize scripture together on the way to and from
Ooh, you're
school.
good at this.
Oh, not really. But I did decide to turn off the radio, turn off the whatever, because if anybody else is in the car with us, that is prime gathering time.
Yeah.
Prime space for reaching mutual goals that we might have. And also, I read something about the eye contact issue.
Yes.
When the kids aren't being stared down by mom in their face, they're going to be more open. Even if they're talking to the back of your head or whatever, you don't have to look in their face sometimes, and that might be better.
Which kind of brings up another great gathering time, which we probably all experienced a lot during COVID, is going on walks together.
Going on walks.
Because that's the same thing. You're all pointed in the same direction.
You're not staring at each other.
Yeah.
I think it makes us all feel a little more confident, not as vulnerable maybe.
Yeah. And that's one of our current traditions that I love the most is we walk to church and we walk home. And often our teenagers aren't with us because they sleep until the very last minute and then they roll out of bed and drive together. Or in this case, this week, skateboard to church because it was the one that couldn't drive. Anyway,
I love that.
So it's not always all of us, but we love walking to church, and sometimes we bring my husband brings a Bluetooth speaker and we play music. We've done choreographed walking. We have done,
I love that.
Sometimes we just watch our youngest dance while we walk. We have little games we play or jokes we play. I don't know. We just really enjoy
I love
that tradition and that time walking together.
We've definitely developed that with my grandkids. They
Nice.
know when Nana comes, we go for walks every day. We just go for walks. And we go to the park, of course. But that time, they look forward to it. Nana, is it walk time? And they're just able, they're not old enough to tell me their deepest feelings or anything yet, but that comfortable belonging, predictability of Nana is going to take us outside and we're going to have a walk. We're going to get some fresh air. We're going to get some exercise. I don't know. That's what they expect me to do every time I come now. And so I hope it continues till they're older.
Yeah, well, that's one of the cool things about it, is that it's something you can do at any
Forever,
age. And,
all ages.
Yeah. Yeah, so that we have loved that, and
I love that.
That was another thing that was cool when I came back, and when I was finally able to join those walks again. Recently it happened again when I had my surgery and I couldn't walk with them, and last Sunday I just walked with them again for the first time since the surgery.
Yay.
And so that was fun to return to that tradition.
I love that.
So some other things that we've done and we've been better at different times, or having date nights with different kids.
Yep.
And usually we've done those, especially when they were younger. We had to divide and conquer, and one of us would take them. So maybe that's more of a one-on-one. Maybe that doesn't count as a gathering, but that's another thing. But then there's also like family meetings, and that's what I wanted to bring up next.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So besides some of those daily things like dinner or maybe scripture study, maybe some of you have breakfast together. I don't know.
Maybe.
We don't.
We don't usually. Weekends, we sometimes do.
Yeah.
Saturdays, sometimes.
Rarely we do. But,
Yeah, we had family meetings really well when my kids were younger. And we had a notebook that we kept notes in
Ooh,
from
let's
each
hear
of our
it.
meetings. So we tried to have them feel like this was an important meeting, like you're part of the business, even though our family's not a business, obviously. But we would
It's an
take notes.
organization,
It's an
though.
organization that we wanted to be organized.
Yeah.
And so each week we would talk about our calendar so that everybody, and we still do that pretty well. Everybody needs to sync their calendars
Yeah.
in some way. And we'd also talk about other things, like what our family vacations the next year should look like. What are your input? What do you want to do? What do you...
So decision making.
Decision making about all sorts of things. Or if something's not working quite right in the house, or somebody's leaving the shoes in the entry hall and people trip on them as they come in the house, or just
So decision making, problem solving. I'm trying to get to the
yes,
purpose
yeah. Okay,
here.
see, I
Like,
love
yeah.
that. Decision making, problem solving, and again, this idea of unity and belonging to an organization that is purposeful in planning ahead.
Yeah.
We'd talk about the organization of our storage room. I just remember all sorts of interesting things we would talk about. Or rules, even reevaluating rules. We've talked a lot about screen time and what should the guidelines in our house be. Might look different at different times for different people. But right now, what does our family need to do? And we need to all have some contribution to it. We always called it family council, and we still do it pretty well. Each Sunday afternoon is usually when we do
So this is a weekly thing.
a weekly thing of whoever's in the house, living in the house at the time, or even if they're guests visiting, we still have it on Sundays.
That's awesome.
And everybody joins in, even if they're not even going to be there for the whole week or whatever. But it's not just a week look ahead; it's further ahead than that too. So I've always loved that. That has been a great gathering, and sometimes obviously we do better than others. But
Yeah.
you know.
Well, and we've tried to do that too. Again, like you, sometimes better than others. And one thing I've tried to do lately is like make it one of the purposes be because I read this book a while ago. So now I've been trying to
So now you're
incorporate these
thinking about
purposes.
purposes. I love
yeah.
that.
So like one of the purposes is how can we help each other? Like so service. Like what can I help you with this week
Oh, I
instead
love
of like maybe ask that before like what's going on this week. So sometimes that's logistical things like rides and other things. Sometimes it's like can you pray for this or like,
Yes.
or sometimes it is like screen time related or like trying to do homework or so it's, a variety of things but changing that from what's on the calendar to what can we help each other with.
I love that.
It's kind of a nice. I mean,
How
you
can
still
I
have to-
help you?
You still have to actually physically get things on the calendar.
Sure,
but,
and logistically,
yeah.
it's important. But I love the perspective of coming at it from how can we help each other this week accomplish what our goals are for this week.
yeah,
I love that.
yeah. So yeah. Again, those have been sometimes more successful than others, especially when you have to tackle those tricky problems that you're having. But it helps if you do have them weekly or close to that, so that it's not like we only have it. I had
Only have it when there's some big catastrophe or something.
I have a friend who told me, we were talking about family meetings, and she said they don't do them very often. And so at one point, I think they were gathering to meet to figure out a vacation or something. But she's like, we need to have a family meeting. And they're like, oh no, Mom, are you pregnant?
Do you have to tell us, did you lose your job, Dad? Yeah.
Like, so if you have it too infrequently,
It'll seem like there's something might be wrong.
Yeah, I'm not saying that a pregnancy is oh no news, but
Agree. Completely agree.
Anyway, so that's kind of helpful if it's not only when you're having a problem that you have these meetings.
I love that. Perfect.
Another thing that we've done that's along those lines, but it's a yearly thing, is that we have a family retreat every Labor Day.
Love it.
So that's kind of that family meeting times 10 or something like that.
Right.
So we just go up to the mountains somewhere close, so we don't have to spend a lot of time driving. It's a 3-day weekend. We go up to the mountains and just usually get rent a Airbnb kind of thing. And then we schedule a lot of fun things. We have a lot of outdoor activities usually, and we try to get a place with a pool and stuff like that. But our main purposes for that are we choose a family motto for the year. We often do a timeline. I brought it here so the ones that are watching on videos, you can kind of see. Is it upside down? Yeah. So we just put everybody's name. You don't see it closely, but you can see. So we put
I love that.
every year on the top, and then we put everybody's name along the side, and then all the main events, so we can see how everything lines up.
Aww.
And we plan vacations and events.
I love that.
And again, how we can support each other. Who's graduating when? When does each person leave the house? Like, so we have it up till what? 2035.
I love that.
So we can see what our family will look like in the future, and it just kind of gives us an idea.
I've never thought of doing it visually. We talk about.
Yeah.
So that year, so-and-so will be doing so-and-so, whatever. But I love that you've put it all out on a
It's really
map.
fun, and we fill it out, and then we bring the last one. Maybe we don't do that. We do that like every 2 or 3, because often we'll just bring it and refer to it still. But then a couple of years down the road, it needs to be updated, and we're like, actually, for my senior trip, I want to go here instead, or whatever. So, but that's kind of fun too, to just like compare notes. Like, this is what I thought I wanted to do. Now I want to do this,
Or even that the year went a little different than you were expecting it might.
yes, like last year, for example. Yeah.
Because we can plan, but.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have to reevaluate. So that's what that is. It's a reevaluation time. And we had to skip.
So you call it a family retreat.
We call it a family retreat. And then
I love that.
we usually we think of a theme. So this year our theme is, I don't even know if I can pronounce it right because it's Norwegian. Friluftsliv, like outdoor living. So we're before that it was look up. Before that, it was all in, so we talk about that theme and we choose it together. We all kind of propose a theme and then we vote on it and choose our theme. Usually it's my husband and I that come up with the theme realistically, but they all buy into it. Choose between the
by giving them a
options.
choice and letting them vote and all that. That's cool.
Totally. And then I don't know. I just plan different activities. We use it as a time for teaching and coming together. So one year, probably my favorite one, I have them right here. Really just organized. But we looks like we had everybody. So the idea was building on our strengths, and identifying our strengths. And so we gave kind of like a little, I don't know if you call it a lecture, whatever.
A lesson.
We taught our kids. We taught our kids about about strengths and gifts and talents and things like that. And we had these long lists of of gifts and talents that they could choose from. We talked about some of them, and then made everybody kind of go to their own little place with sticky notes and write down five gifts or strengths or talents of everybody in the family. So now we have these sticky notes that should be more organized. In fact, I should pass them out to them to remind them all. But they have these basically compliments from everybody in the family of, what they think their innate gifts are. And it was such an uplifting discussion. We all did that separately, and then we came together, and we'd have that person stand at the front of the room, and everybody would read what was on their note, and we stuck them on the wall.
They're the star.
Yeah. And then, so we stuck them on the wall. But so that's an example. But we do things like that. We play games together. Yeah. We always have a game night. We always have a movie night. And, we try to even pick the movie strategically. If it's on theme, great. Or just something uplifting, like, maybe you watch some inspirational movie, or you just watch something that makes you laugh, whatever you guys need at the moment. But try to even plan that ahead of time. But anyway, so that's one of the things that we do. We always look forward to Labor Day for that purpose. And the kids have come to expect that, so that, sometimes we'll have some of those meetings in the hot tub, some of those discussions.
Right. It's not all sit down on hardback chairs and look at each other.
Yeah.
Meetings happen when you're comfortable.
Yeah, totally. Too. We had one time we decided on our family motto in a teepee that we found while we were on a bike ride in the woods. Aww. And there was just this random teepee, and we're like, that's the perfect place. And so we all sat in there and figured out, so it's just fun to get away. And the reason we get away is because if you're home, you just do your normal routine and you scatter.
Do. You're right.
And you
so. Do.
So anyway.
Another thing we did this year is we met via Zoom over the course of about 4 months to discuss a particular talk that we received in General Conference for our church, a church conference we had in April. We wanted to make sure that we shared things that were most important to us with each other.
Oh, cool.
And, when they don't live at home, you don't often talk about the things that matter most on a regular basis. So we chose a Zoom meeting every second and fourth Sunday of the month, and we did it for a few months. Each person took turns leading the discussion, and I loved it. It was such a great way to gather, talking about something especially that matters a lot to me and to my husband. How can we focus on the things that matter most in our life, and how can we help each other do that? And I think by giving each person responsibility to lead the discussion, some magical things happened. And it wasn't just Dad and Mom leading the discussions. It was, as a member of this family, I want you to know this, coming from one of our children or one of our sons-in-law. Granted, this format didn't work great for grandkids, but for the rest of us, meeting on Zoom regularly, planned ahead, was beautiful. Because if we can't talk about the things that matter most to us with the people that matter most to us, maybe we're missing the whole point of why we gather as families.
And that is a very good way to kind of conclude this section on purpose. I feel like we could probably go on forever just thinking of specific examples and stuff. But I really love what this book has done for my family in terms of thinking about purpose behind some of our gatherings. So we have a ways to go.
We have a ways to go too.
But yeah, I think.
But we can. That's the thing. I think one step in the right direction, thinking about something differently just a little bit, can make a huge difference. And we'll all just keep trying, and our gatherings will be more bold and more punctuated with zeal and
crackling,
as she says.
Yes. So thanks for gathering with us today, and I hope it has been purposeful.
I hope so too. Bye-bye.
Bye.